The idea is just to go out and pick up whoever is wounded, whoever, whatever the call is, you go out and pick them up almost no matter what.
You have an idea, perhaps you have a specific number or a general idea of how many dust-off missions you flew, or how many missions, because perhaps not all of them were dust-off, but how many missions you flew between February and May? I mean, would there be at least one mission every day, that kind of thing?
Of most, I'd say very few of them were actually hot, really combat missions. Most of them were picking up civilians. And I'd say we picked up either maybe even half of the pickups were civilian pickups. And the maybe 100 total missions, but some of those are just taking blood to transferring whole blood from one hospital to a dispensary or something like that,
Right.
or an aid station.
And I think, if I remember correctly, the dust-off flights were not armed, right? They did not have the machine guns on them.
Oh no, no machine guns except for the first cab. First cab had it. That was down south, which I
Okay.
don't know. I don't have any experience with, but I do know that the first cab did. They weren't dust off. They were first cab Medevac.
Right.
So that's a different thing. But I mean, we had my crew chief would always have an M16, and as I said, I carried a Smith and Wesson 38 police special revolver.
So when you're responding to calls for civilians, what kinds of things are you getting? Is it a civilian has tripped a mine, a civilian has been injured some other way? What kinds of things are you looking at?
Oh my, yeah. Um, the pregnancies. I picked up pregnant women. We picked up uh, traffic accidents. We picked up fires. Uh, some of them were medically ill, just some sort of disease. Uh, it was a real mixed bag. Um, some of them were frag wounds. No gunshot wounds. No one had actually shot these people. There was sort of a fragment wound or a trauma, massive tissue wound, trauma.
What's the process? When, let's say, a call comes in, we have, a villager who's hurt somehow. Typically, how much information would you have before this person gets on the Huey?
Wow, it's filtered down through the operator, the radio operator, and then the pilot and the aircraft commander. They get briefed, and then they come out and tell us what they've heard. So I'm getting it really about third hand, if that. And they would say we have well, they would say you have this type of mission. You have a civilian pickup, a sucking chest. Well, they wouldn't have a sucking chest one, but anyway, they would have a traffic accident where there's extremity, right arm torn up, or I really can't remember. I can't build that sort of report right now in my head. But,
Yeah.
that's how it was. So they describe it, you know.
So after you acquire some experience and you get this basic information, and I mean, are you kind of planning in your head, okay, here's what I'm going to do first when we get this person on the Huey?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, um, I know whether I'm going to use it, but have an IV ready or not. Get an IV ready, and usually there's a med. I think almost always there was a medic on the ground that I already given the most basic first
Oh,
aid.
yeah.
So it's trying to get the person to the hospital and stabilizing the whole way there. And it's once we picked up people, it wasn't long before we got them to either an aid station or a hospital.
So when you think about these civilian pickups,
Yeah.
and you know, you run them, at least some of them, I'm sure you probably remember pretty well. I wonder if there's one particular civilian pickup you can remember that you can describe what happened.
Yeah. We picked up five children that had been burned in a house fire. And they were, I couldn't get any vital signs from them. And here they were kind of under a sheet. They put them on. And, and I didn't have any empathy. And that shook me up. I felt like, why am I not feeling anything for these children? This is wrong. Something's wrong with me. And so it took me a long time to figure the whole thing out. And that lack of empathy diminished a bit over the years, but that was until I finally faced it 30 years later.
Wow. You know, you hear about that all the time, a certain, for lack of a better phrase, a certain deadness of spirit. Um,
Mhm.
Often will settle in on a person in the world of war, a certain coldness. Um,
It works. It works.
hmm,
I
let
mean,
me,
you can do the job. And it was just some kind of psychological shield that had that set up inside of my psyche.
it makes sense, a psychological defense. Yeah, well, let's talk about some of the missions you had involving military personnel. Um,
Mm.
I think you had interaction with Republic of Korea ROK forces.
All right, yeah.
Um, so just even when I say that to you, the ROK forces, the Koreans of our allies there in South Vietnam, what missions come to mind?
The hot Korean hoist mission was the one that nobody wanted to go on, and that was the big trauma or the big bugaboo in the background because the Koreans, when you ask them, um, they first one of the questions that the pilots would ask them is it a hot pickup? Or do
Meaning
you
if
have
there's
any
combat
contact?
going on,
Are
right?
you in contact?
Yeah,
And when the Americans would go, it is this, it is that, it's from the Northwest, it's under these conditions, and this is where the action is happening. Take it. Not the Koreans. They would say, oh, we have a little bit. There's a little bit of contact. And that meant that they had a full firefight going on.
the full-blown fire.
And the one that I'm remembering right now, it was I was in Trang at the time. My helicopter been sent down to support that detachment. That's something. Um, 498 Dustoff had detachments, and you might have heard of the 283rd in Pleiku.
Hmm.
That was a detachment. I think they had 5 or 6 helicopters, something like that. And when they have trouble with their helicopters and another one, we go up and support it. So anyway, just in case this was down in Nha Trang, beautiful city.
Hmm.
Um, and one time they said there's a hot Korean hoist mission. And first up, I thought, well, I'm second up. I'm not going on that. So I thought, okay. So um, the guy, I had already tried to make friends with the medic that I was that was going to hear that, and he was just wasn't very open. He didn't talk very much. He was a very rather quiet guy, and so I'd only been there for a day, so I didn't we hadn't developed anything. Very quiet, and so he went out and when they finally got to the area, it was a very steep mountain, um, and it just pulled in, and they got hit 5 times before they got out of there. A small arms fire. They had 5 holes in the helicopter, and so they just turned right around and came back because it hit something that made it not It
Not
was
saying
an important place. It did messed up their helicopter somehow. I don't know how. And so they brought it back. And they said, okay, second up. And uh, they gave us a little bit of time there. And he came in, the medic came in, and this guy who didn't say a word, he said, and he was like this, and look at this, look at my head, this my rifle, and you see this right here, this. What had happened is one of the bullets had hit the clip on his rifle and didn't hurt him, but he was just so hyper, and it was just a like a different person. So I thought this is going to be exciting, and that's why they have second ups. It's that where the next guy's out. We have to go back out there and get them.
Wow.
And I think there were supposedly three Koreans out there that were wounded at the time when they first called it up. And so um, it was a bit of time, the delay, and they said the delay was because they had to organize gunships for our protection. So we got in, flew out there, and there were, as I remember, there were five gunships hovering off the mountain, and that's how I know the steepness of the mountain. And the apparently the North Vietnamese were above shooting down, so that made it even worse for us because
Mm.
what it means is that they're as we're they just have to shoot almost straight out.
Okay.
And
Yeah, right.
yeah, and a helicopter in a hoist position, it takes a long time for that hoist to go all the way down, especially the steeper it was. So this thing goes down really slowly and back up slowly. So anyway, so we just hovered out there for a while they unloaded their rockets. So they would all their rocket pods would go up. There were I think two or three Cobras, and the rest of the others were B model Hueys, the squat ones. And they just worked out on that hill. And finally they said, okay, dust off, you go in. And so we came around and pulled in there and we hovered. And by that time, there were five seriously wounded that had to be taken out. So that means something called a force penetrator on a hoist.
Right.
It's yellow, and it folds down with three seats. And the Koreans knew what to do with that. And so they got down and they folded it out and put the people on, strapped them in, hold them up, and they were bad. They were really hurt badly. And one of them was either dead or died before I could do anything. I mean, it was just. Then I had to send it down again.
Yeah, wow.
And then not one time and they were still shooting. They were still fighting down there, and they didn't shoot at us anymore. They knew we had big brothers out there. So um, lowered the force penetrator down there, and the second time brought up the ones that were less wounded. And the Koreans, the Korean medics, I don't know why they do this, but they would put the bandages on, the field dressings on extremities, especially with such force that it was almost a tourniquet. And so I that's one thing. In order to save their arms, a lot of times I would cut or the leg or whatever, well, mostly arms, because that's where it would shut off the arterial flow. It's too difficult to do with the leg, but anyway, and I would just cut them off and then or use the same dressing and just wrap it up with the elastic bandage.
Right.
And I never had to continue to bleed after that. The pressure was enough, and that was distributed over a larger area, so it didn't cut off the arterial flow. Anyway, and we finished that and took them back to the Korean hospital, and they called us again. We went out there again. Same thing. Didn't get shot at. So,
Because the NVA knew that you had the gunships with you. So
and they were hovering out there. They could see them out there, just waiting.
So in this case, the gunships, their orders were to protect you and not necessarily focus on supporting the South Koreans.
Exactly. That's what they were there for because they weren't there before and they were actually asked. They were told to go out there.
And then you have missions involving ARVN forces, the
Yeah,
South Vietnamese forces. So when I mention that missions involving ARVN forces, what comes to mind there?
they they weren't straight with us. They would um, a lot of times they wanted their dead out rather than we're not supposed to do that.
Mm,
That's quartermaster responsibility. And that's against the Geneva Convention to for us to do that. But they would call us in and they'd say, "Oh, there's this gunshot wound to the head, and it's very serious." And you get there and half the head's gone. I mean, that's just I don't need that. And I mean, we're risking going in there and to have that happen. It didn't happen. It happened way too often. But another memory I have is going in and having the ARVNs. They were under attack and they were freaking out, and a lot of the guys were just trying to jump on the ship to get out of there. And I had to kick them, actually hold on to the thing and kick them off. Um,
these were guys
because
who were running away from battle, basically.
yeah, yeah. I should explain the physical situation there in the helicopter. I didn't sit in, there's those benches along the transmission up uh, on each side where like the
Right.
door got.
Sure.
Okay, that's not where I was sitting. I was sitting on a plate, a metal plate, supposedly bulletproof, hopefully bulletproof plate
Right.
uh, on the deck. Then I was strapped in. I was strapped into that position. But a lot of times I can't work like that. So a lot of the times I was flying without any seat belt or anything like that.
Wow.
Later on, they started using what we call monkey suits, but I saw one, but we didn't have them at the time, where it's sort of a web thing that goes over your body and you can move around and you're strapped in. But I didn't have that. If I had fallen out, that would have been it.
Right. Um, so you've said a little bit about the ROC forces, the South Korean forces, and the ARVN forces. What was your perception of them? I've heard from veterans who had perceptions of the South Korean forces, what they were like as a fighting force. I've heard from vets who have thoughts about what the ARVNs were like as a fighting force. Given your perspective, you're looking at things from the perspective of a dust-off helicopter. What was your view of the ROCs and the ARVNs?
Well, the rocks, they were they were excellent infantry. Uh, their whole military seemed to be a very incredibly disciplined unit and enforced brutally.
Mm,
They would brutalize their own people. Um, and as far as their behavior on the ground, they didn't worry too much about Geneva Convention or anything like that. They would go in, they were killers. They would go in and they would pacify the area without hesitation, which I mean, it's they didn't seem to have any repercussions for
mm,
taking out a village
right.
because they thought there was something wrong with it. Um, Honestly, I'm a little bit ashamed of this, but I found they ate something called kimchi.
Hmm.
A lot of people know kimchi, but it was a sea ration type of kimchi, and oh gosh, it smelled terrible and made it really difficult to give mouth to mouth resuscitation. Oh,
Uh,
gosh.
all right, so that's a
Sorry
completely
about that.
that's a
Yeah,
completely unique mem. I've never heard anything like that before.
yeah.
But
Uh,
yeah, so
people say, "Do you want to try kimchi?" I don't know.
oh
Thanks.
boy. So if
Yeah.
you're if you're heading into
Anyway,
I'm sorry, if you're
go
heading
ahead.
into a situation where you might need to give mouth to mouth to a South Korean, in the back of your mind is the thought, I hope this guy hasn't eaten kimchi lately.
No, no, I had to. It happened. So I've been like, it's just not. But honestly, the mouth-to-mouth and cardiac compression, I didn't really, I was never able to save anybody for that, from
Mm.
that. I mean, I had to do it, I had to try, but it didn't work. You have to be in a really a sweet spot to make that work. And anyway, um, ARVNs, as far as the fighting force, I don't know. I had my opinion of them, and it was not very good. I mean, because that's what everybody else had with all these stories. But I didn't, honestly, firsthand, I didn't see anything except for that one instance where the guys were trying to run away. But that was really bizarre.
They were trying to flee battle by getting onto the dust-off helicopter.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and now with U.S. forces, so a lot
Hmm.
of missions involving U.S. forces. Um, what are two missions that especially come to mind?
One that was bizarre, I'd say, and I don't think we should. I think we should never have done it. Um, I think we were in Pleiku at the time, near Pleiku, and they said we have a situation where the people are they'll die from thirst, from dehydration if we don't get water out to them.
Mm.
And that's not the responsibility of helicopter and ambulance, but they said they kind of somehow decided to declare this medical emergency. And so I said, okay. So I went out there, and I don't know who was thinking about this, but they had a bladder of water. Now this thing was maybe maybe 3 feet by 3 feet by maybe a foot. So that's a third of a ton of water. Okay, that's a lot. I mean, that's 600 pounds. And they had just put it right there in the middle. And so I'm thinking, how well they'll help us when we can get there. They'll help. We got there, and they had blown the landing, cleared a landing place by. They took C4 and put it on a tree and blast it and leave stumps. And we can't land with stumps poking through the bottom of our helicopter. So um, we got there, and we had to hover. And so these guys on the ground, honestly, they came out with a poncho to just push it out. And there's talk back and forth. We can't do this. This makes no sense. They said, just push it out. I had not hardly anything to hold on to push it. You know, the litter pole is over here. So I finally grabbed that, and I think I grabbed the door and I worked it out. And I got Andy, my crew chief, to help me push it. We finally got it out. And of course, the thing broke when it hit the thing. So the water goes everywhere. I don't know how much water they got. And one of the guys on the ground locked and loaded on us. I mean, and I said, I told the aircraft commander over the intercom, I said, they just locked and loaded on us. And so he said, radio down, like, you do that, something, something, something. I don't know what happened, but anyway, they got,
Wow.
I backed down. But I mean, pointing a rifle at us, it just doesn't make any sense. They were obviously really desperate for water.
You have recollections of interaction you had on the Huey with a wounded soldier or anything like that in that time?
The medics on the ground had always done a very, very fine job with them, and it was just making sure that nothing went wrong. Um, Up to the point of having to, about the only thing I would have to do with the Americans would be to start an IV rather than what they had, you know. So that was because everything, like, IV bottles were bottles, they were glass. So they, the combat medic isn't going to be carrying around glass IV bottles, you know.
Sure.
So that's what I did a lot of. I remember we picked up a LRP team. That's long range reconnaissance patrol. We were coming in, and it was that we were talking to other people. Well, the aircraft commander was talking to somebody out there. I don't know who it was. And then we finally switched over to the LERP game. And so it's like dust off 37, blah, 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 back and forth. You could hear everybody really clearly. And so we go over to the LERP team, and you get dust off 37, dust off 37. They said, "Could you please speak up?" This is an insertion team of, I think, six. I'm not sure. As I remember, six guys, and one of them was wounded, right? And they got a little bit louder, just enough, but they were still whispering. And I'm thinking, like, if they're whispering, that means the Viet Cong are really close, or the NVA, which one of them? They must be really, really close, and they're hiding. They're trying not to be found. You think, like, my goodness. And if they're trying to avoid combat, that means that they're outnumbered. Listen, that's when I really had stuff going through my head. I'll tell you that. And finally, we got closer, and they said, "Okay." They whispered over the radio, "We're going to fire off claymores." The claymore mine is a little thing with a little tripod stand on it. It blasts out. It's a perimeter. It establishes a perimeter and it protects. And the pilot said, "No, don't, because we don't want anything thrown up into the helicopter. Damaging the helicopter." That's what they said. I don't know. Anyway, so we went in and we picked those guys up. We had to take all of them out because as soon as we're there, obviously everyone knows, oh, there's the helicopter going down. That's where it is.
So you had these LERPs on the Huey.
Yeah.
And then I'm assuming it's too loud. You're not really able to say anything back and forth.
They're not chatting.
Right.
Every once in a while, somebody would say, "Oh, thank heavens that's over," or "Thanks." A lot of, but not so much. It's just these guys are traumatized also. I mean, I don't expect to have an appreciative conversation with them or anything.
Right.
I did have a lot of people say, "Hey, thanks."
What is the story of when your Huey was shot down?
For me, it was an incredible experience and one that I treasured, oddly enough. And it happened before, it started before I went up to Duck Pho, because I heard that I was being sent up to Duck Pho because they only had two dust offs up there, two helicopters up there. And I figured, like, how did they go up? I was assigned with my crew chief to go up there, and they would supply the pilots up there, which is typical. But I was really excited because I hadn't seen any of my friends from medical training, and these were the two Baha'is, like I was. So, I mean, I was hyped. I was really ready to go. I was like, "This is fabulous!" I could be with some very, very good friends. And oddly enough, a guy walked up to me the day before I went there, and that was when I had found out. He said, "Something's the matter with you. I sense it." He said, "Whatever it is, don't go. Don't do it." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "You're going to be killed." I thought, that's okay. Later on that day, the same thing happened again with another guy. That's all I can say. There was nothing attached to it. So the next day, I'm still charged. I want to go. And got up there with my friends, and they said, "Be really careful," because I felt like I can't be any careful. There's no careful in dust off. You just do your job. And so the next day we got a call. The first day I told you about the one with the water, but the next day I got this call of two ARVN soldiers that were wounded, and for the ARVNs, you don't get a clear understanding of how they were wounded a lot of times. This time we didn't, so I had to be ready for anything. So we got there. Had to go out and pick up an interpreter, or we took one from Lane, or from the fire base. We got out there, and they had blown an area in the forest, and we got down. We couldn't land, so I had to reach down, and I was pretty strong by that time, so I held onto the litter pole. That's that kind of vertical pole on a helicopter, and reached down, and he was in a kind of a poncho. So with my left arm, right-handed, I had to pick him up and put him in.
Wow.
I don't know how I did it. So, but they got him in, and then I got another guy the same way in,
Wow.
and so we got that. So we were hovering the whole time, and so we got it up. So I thought, okay, well, this is over. So we're going to drop off. Now I don't know if we dropped off um, the interpreter or not. Must not have. We must have had him on board, and I do not remember him after that. What happened, if he was there or what? But anyway, um, so we were going back to drop him off to be treated, and we got a call. And it said we have from this one unit, it said we have five seriously, extremely seriously wounded patients. They're dying, or if you don't pick them up. And it was a hot LZ, and we're getting hit by small arms and B-40 rockets. A B-40 rocket is like an RPG, shoulder-mounted anti-tank weapon. So it goes through I think the 6 or 12 inches of steel. It can burn through that and then explode. So it's got a shape, something called a shaped charge that blasts forward, and they can kill the people going through that much steel in
Yeah.
the tank. And so we thought that he actually, and I wasn't aware of this, Terry Zinger was the aircraft commander. I'd only met him the day before and only had maybe 10 words with him. He's the pilot, or he's the aircraft commander. So anyway, he says, is it okay with the rest of you in the crew? He actually asked us, each one of us, to make sure that we're ready to go in. We said, yeah, let's go. We'll go. And
And were these American wounded, or were these RV?
no,
These were
this
RV.
is the ARVN.
Okay.
This is the ARVN.
Yeah.
And so we we went there, and there the guys, there's, when you go into a landing zone, there's a guy who's supposed to hold up the rifle like this, and left, right, down, that sort of thing. And this guy's like this all over the place because they were in the middle of a firefight. So
Wow.
I'm thinking, like, okay, you don't like standing up in the middle of something. How about us, And nothing. We weren't hit. We weren't hit. Nothing happened. And we were just about, the skids were about maybe 3 feet off the ground. I said, can you move it back about 5, 10 feet, because it's not level ground here. This isn't good. And so just as I said that, I was holding on to the litter post, leaning out the right side, and all of a sudden, there's a big thump, and my right eye went black. I didn't see anything out of it, and my right arm, it hit me right here, and it hit an artery there. So it threw me back up against the pilot's seat. He was facing forward. I kind of went back into it. And so I grabbed my arm, and just to stop the bleeding, I just had, kind of thinking, I was able to stop arterial bleeding just by doing that.
Wow.
So, but, and then the pilot immediately tried to fly it away. And I heard him say, we're having engine trouble. And I heard this pop, 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 pop. And I thought, sounds like an old Model T Ford or something like that, some really ancient vehicle having engine trouble. I thought, no, clear my head. This is a jet engine. It doesn't go popping and popping and pop. Those bullets hitting the helicopter.
Wow.
So yeah. So the pilot says, are you guys okay back there? I said, Andy, are you okay? And he said, my crew chief. And he looked over and goes, like that. I said, yeah, I think Andy's okay. And I said, I've been hitting the right arm, the right leg, and my eye. I don't know how bad is my eye. And he said, well, tell me. And so I thought, oh my, I got to reach up and feel. And I know how bad, I know people who can have traumatic brain injuries and still be able to talk normally. And I'm thinking like, oh my goodness, I got to reach up. I reached up and I felt it cut my cheek here, the little frag cut my cheek here and went into the eye. And that was all. It's just a tiny little frag, about the size of a bit of a pencil lead, that tiny thing. And I said, I've been hit. It's an artery hit on the right arm and my eye. And so, okay. And so he said, I'm going to put it down. Oh, and then he said, um, we have a fire in the 90-degree gearbox. And so he said, we have to put it down. And so we flew maybe about 300 yards, something like that, maybe less, across this little stream. And we landed in this sandbar, I guess, something like that. And we got out, and no, you put it down in the stream itself. That was it. You put it down in the stream, and to put out the fire, and it worked. And my job in that case is when you get out, my job is to go out and get the pilot's door open and help the pilot get out and push it back. There's a plate that comes out here that protects them, and I'm supposed to push that back. I couldn't get the door open; it was all shut up. And then all of a sudden, there were two more holes up there that weren't there before. I'm thinking like, oh, that means they're shooting at us.
Mm.
I just couldn't. Anyway, so his eyes got really big. He climbed over the console and got up the other side. And everybody was already across and already in defensive position. I was still standing out there, and I don't know how fast. So I came around the front. I heard them say, "Get out, Treadwell." So I got, that's right. They taught us that in basic training. That's what's going through my mind. So I lean over and I walk a little bit faster, get across the thing. I still had my helmet on. And I thought, I'm going to leave my helmet on because that's a ballistic helmet. It's better than not. Everybody else took their helmets off, not this kid. So so we got across, and Terry Zinger came up to me and he said, uh, how is it? So I said, well, I need to get a dressing on this. He said, where's the aid bag? I said, oh, I left it out there. Just, I should not have done that, but I mean, so, and then he said, what about there was some ammo back there for this M1 carbine. So, and I said, no, I left that out there too. So he goes, I'll get it. I felt like, this is like the movies. He's like being John Wayne or something like that. So he goes, oh, I'll get it. So he gets up, he says, Andy, cover me. And Andy's going, and so Andy just turns around and just sprays a clip of ammo. I mean, like just fully automatic until the clip was finished. And Singer immediately dropped down and that was in water. So he got all wet. He said, what do you see? What do you see? And Andy says, I didn't see anything. He said, what were you shooting at? He says, well, you told me to cover you. I thought that's how you're supposed to do it. And I don't remember what Singer said, but Andy's response was, that's what they do in the movies. So, I mean, yeah. So more absurdities. But anyway, that was what happened. And so um, he went out there and he got the aid bag and the bandoliers of there were several clips in them full of ammo. Came back with it, and he opens up the aid bag. Oh, that's right. He called in. Sorry, I got a little bit out of the sequence. He called in on the walkie-talkie. He goes, "Mayday, Mayday! This is where we are. This is what happened." Mm-hmm. And so they came out. Oh, eventually they got there. But anyway, so he went out and got it. And he brought it back, and he put the dressings. He opened it up and got the first dressing he could get. I said, "Sir, that's an abdominal dressing." I mean, this thing's huge, I mean, a typical one is the one that I was expecting to have it put on my arm. And no, he takes this thing out, and he's more concerned about the eye. So he puts it around like this and ties it behind, and things hanging down like they see on a burqa, these Afghan burqas, hanging down like that. It's not even touching my eye. I said, "Sir, he says, you're not the medic anymore. You're the patient." I'm like, okay, well, I can't argue with him. So he reaches another abdominal dressing, and he tries to put that on my arm. So the thing's sticking out like this around my arm. Okay.
You're starting to look like a mummy a little bit.
It was ridiculous. Anyway, so I'm supposed to turn around, and as I told you before, my right arm was messed up, so I couldn't use my pistol in my hand. So I had a pistol out with my left hand, pointing it. I knew I couldn't hit anything, but I was supposed to hold it like that. So I did that.
Wow.
And by the way, I should remind you, there were these two Vietnamese soldiers that were wounded that we had picked up before. So they were still they were on the helicopter with us.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so that was one of them had that rifle, that M1 carbine I was talking about. And that's why I knew about the ammo. And he had a traumatic injury of the thigh, posterior thigh. And the other guy had been shot through his hand, which I really pitied that guy, because I mean, that's the end of the hand, the functional hand. I mean, that's all the metacarpals were right there. So I was one to make sure those guys were okay. And then Terry said, no, don't do that. You're just a patient. You stay there, and they're okay. They haven't been hurt. So I was the only one who was hurt on the helicopter, which is very odd for a B-40 rocket, because usually, I mean, that thing exploded into the JP-4 bladder. I mean, there's a bladder, big fuel tank, they call it a bladder, full of JP-4 fuel, jet fuel, and it blasted into it and up.
Wow. Wow.
And we were on fire, and you can see the burn marks on the helicopter that I sent you.
Were you certain that you were going to make it?
No, I would. It was incredible. As soon as I was hit, I felt this incredible peace. And I was okay for it. I figured I was probably going to be killed. And I was praying, preparing myself. I was thinking like, okay, well, that's it. That's looking another adventure. It's kind of, I, not typical stuff, but I mean, that's what it was. And honestly, I had such a feeling of peace, internal peace. There were these two shark gunships. The reason I call them shark is they had painted big toothy shark grins on the front of their choppers.
They're the Cobras.
Oh no, they were Hueys. They were Hueys B models.
Okay.
They had the miniguns and the rocket pods.
Right.
And after quite a while out there, 15 minutes out there exposed, they came in and they started flying figure eights over the whole thing. And that's very reassuring. Maybe another 10 minutes, a slick came out and picked us up and took us back to the base.
So then what's the process? You go through a series of medical facilities. And so just walk us through the different medical facilities you went through and that whole process of recovery.
Right. Well, they took me first back to to Duck Pho, the fire base, Duck Pho fire base. And my two friends were there, and they treated me. And my arm ached like I had broken my ulna, and no, the radius rather. And I thought, gee, it feels like the radius might be cracked. And so they took off the dressing, and they put on another dressing. They put what they call a ladder splint. It's kind of a wire thing that they can shape any way they want. And I put a patch over my eye. And I guess I was there for maybe another, seemed like maybe a couple hours, and we just chatted. It was
Mm.
very, very friendly, and everything. It was nice. It's an underground bunker. It's where the aid station is. So I mean, it's not like it's you kind of go down into it. It was dug out, and so um, then they put me into a one of those cracker box type of ambulance, and drove me out to the flight line. And I put me on a C-130 cargo plane and flew me down first to 67th Evac Hospital, which I thought was that's going to be interesting. I can talk to some of my friends there, and then they said no, they don't have the right specialist there. So they wanted an ocular specialist to deal with my eye, and so they sent me down to Tuiwa. There, they took the frag out of my eye with a magnet.
Wow.
Now, so apparently worked it out. I was kind of under some sort of sedation. I was conscious. And when they said, okay, we've taken it out, for some reason I thought they took my eye out. And it freaked me out. And I thought, oh my goodness, they didn't tell me they were going to take my eye out. They've already taken it out. No, just a little tiny frag. And so then I was unconscious. And I don't know why, maybe it's what they gave me. I don't know. And the next thing I know, I can't see anything at all. And I'm just totally blind. And I reached up and I realized that I was dressing. So I reached up and I pulled it off like this. I thought, oh, I can see. And at that time, I thought, what is happening? And the nurses came over. I was back in the ward, and they restrained me. They put these leather straps around my wrists and restrained me to the bed. I said, look, it's already over. I just didn't know what was happening, but they left me that way for a while. But I had another feeling like, oh, thank heavens that I am still wounded, because now I get out of Vietnam.
Mm.
Vietnam didn't bother me like that at the time, or the combat didn't bother me that time. But going back into it, when I had a chance to go home, I was ready to say goodbye to the eye.
Now,
So
when you realized you could see, were you able to see only
left
only
eye.
out of your left eye? You couldn't see out of your right eye.
It was black. They I remember they came in and they had a very bright light that they put in my left eye, flinched from it, did over my right eye, and I could see, oh, when they put it right in there, I could see just like a dull red glow, and that's it. So apparently it was just the blood inside the eye. So after those 3 days, they shipped me off to Yokohama, a place called Camp Drake in Japan. And I was there where they debrided the wound, let it heal. And then I think they sewed it up right before I left. But it was open. Can you imagine? They just open. I could watch my muscles move. It was fascinating. You see the internal muscles. They just left it open to heal, and that's the way they dealt with that. Because there are bits of my shirt in there for that matter, not just the frag. But I mean, that's just
Wow.
if you kind of forget that it's not just a bullet or a fragment going into this, it's what's in between. And so that healed up nicely. And so I went back, was then transferred from there, put on a C-141 and flown to Travis Air Force Base near San Francisco, and then to put in Letterman Hospital. And that's when they did the enucleation. They removed the eye and let me heal up. And then I was allowed to go home. And I was issued a medical retirement, not discharged. Huge difference. Medical retirement means as if I'd been in 20 years. So I had free access to medical, uh, the all military based facilities. I was retired as if I'd been in the military for 20 years. I was working in Washington, D.C. 30 years later. Um, and they had a big Vietnam veterans event down at the wall. And so I walked down there from where I was, and that's where I had those experiences of vets saying thank you. To have somebody who's been in combat say thank you to you is significant.